If you can all stand for a moment of silence in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So that the record reflects those members who are present, I will now call the roll. Councilman Zelkowitz.
Present.
Councilman Meltz.
Present.
Councilwoman Birch.
Present.
Vice Mayor Brady.
Present.
Mayor Glenn.
Present.
You have quorum.
Great. We're going to open it up now for public comment. I'm going to give 3 minutes to each speaker. Please give your name and your address before you start speaking. Thank you.
My name is Joan Drody Lutton, and I live at 167 Northwest 109th Street, and I've lived in Miami Shores for 75 years. I learned to swim in the old pool, and I swim at least 3 days a week in the new pool. And I came to talk to you tonight about your agenda item to take money from Bay Harbor Isles. Take the money. I think it's free money. And being a big pool user, it's not going to be a huge amount of people. This is a small community over there. It's a high rent community, a lot of old people. How many kids could they have? Take the money. That's it.
Jones good. No brain.
Good evening, Mary Benton, 10108 Northeast First Avenue. I'm standing here to talk to you about the Lime Bike program, which my husband and I, he's going to stand up as well. We think it's a really important thing that the village is doing. I confess I have not been on a bike for a lot of years, and I haven't worked up the courage yet to try it, but I know that there are many instances in which it would be very useful. But I think most of all, what I really like about it is that it is a visible reminder of our pledge to our kids that we're taking climate change seriously, and we not only are going to work to make our community resilient and sustainable, but we're going to work to reduce our carbon footprint, because that is their future. And this is a bright green reminder of that up and down our Main Street, and I really hope you guys extend the contract. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Doug Barnes, 10108 Northeast First Avenue. I too am a fervent supporter of the Lime Bike program. I have tried it out, unlike my wife, and I use it to zip here and there. It's very convenient. I like, frankly, how they look. I think they're attractive to the eye as you come in, and I like the signal it sends. And I love the fact that to the extent people are using them, and I hope they are, that we are reducing our use of carbon fuels. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ines Hegedus Garcia. I'm a 30-plus year resident of the Shores. My address is 1201 Northeast 98th Street, and I'm here for 2 of your agenda items quickly. Lime bikes. With every city, there's growing pains, and the growing pains, I think, is about educating people and letting them know where to put the bikes, not put the bikes. I think we're all going to experience that. I absolutely love it. The fact that I don't have to go to my house, get a bike, to ride on a bike when I'm at the community center with my kids at soccer. My husband and I have actually grabbed the bike and gone around the shores, we would have never done that before, so I definitely commend you on that. And the second item is obviously the RMA that you're gonna approve tonight. I commend every one of you for having gone through this process. I was part of the charrette in the 90s for downtown Miami Shores. I think every single resident of the Shores sees a beautiful, bright future for a downtown area, and things have to change, and I know, again, growing pains with every owner, every landlord, and new rules. We don't like rules, but they're gonna thank you in a few years. I'm a realtor in town. I know property values are gonna go up because of the changes that will happen in downtown, and every landlord will thank you, because even the retail prices are going to increase as well. And that's it, thank you.
Good evening, Patrice Gillespie Smith, 358 Northeast 101st Street. I just wanted to echo Ms. Hegedus's comments. First of all, I've had the pleasure to work with her on Plaza 98. She's attracted quite a few grants to downtown, and we are thrilled when people like that are investing in downtown. And we're thrilled that you really are on the cusp of making something of that investment you put into the sewers. And by implementing the RMA recommendations and changing what we currently have so that it's appealing to all residents, I have to say we're very excited. There's other residents who have told me they've been working on this issue for 30 years as well. Cheryl Piper often says she had a group that gave up eventually, but with your action tonight, we feel that you're going to have the tools to make sure we have a foundation to attract retail uses, restaurants, everything that we all heard during campaign season about an active downtown. So we're very excited about that. And indeed, I am so excited that Lime Bike has been a success to date. I've seen a lot of people, kids especially, on Lime Bikes going to practice at the field house, going to their bus stops. It's just neat that they're actually using it as a real mode of transportation. So thank you for your investment.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, Mike Llorente with Llorente and Heckler, and we represent Lime Bike. Now, I can't speak with the same passion or eloquence as your residents who have already spoken on this program, and in any event, theirs are the voices that matter. So I'll be short and simply, again, reiterate the success of this program. There have been approximately 1,100 registered users during the 90-day pilot, 2,000 cumulative riding miles. It's been a tremendous success, and so we would urge you, as they have, to extend this this program and enter into a longer-term relationship with Lime Bike. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Lou Perez, 145 Northeast 103rd Street. Happy New Year, everyone. I think we can still say that. I'd like to make reference to Tom Benton's memo to council dated December 22nd with regard to the Lime Bike issue. Just to read a portion of it. Council has several options. You can end the program, ask Lime Bike to remove the bicycles from the community, renew their contract on a year-to-year basis, or go out to a competitive bid if there's other vendors that wish to compensate the village for allowing them to use the bicycles in our community. I'd like to reiterate that we should, as I did before, ask Lime Bike for a contribution from their proceeds to the village, to something in the village, for the use of our village right-of-ways and everything else for their bicycles. It could benefit any program that council chooses, but I think there should be a contribution from them for our village. And everybody seems to like the program. So again, please make that consideration a part of the contract, and it should be on an annual basis so that each year they contribute something to benefit the village. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Al Crespo. So, on November the 4th, I came before you all and I raised 4 questions. Question number 1 was, what was the cost of the hurricane cleanup? Question number 2 was, Chamber of Commerce report on the downtown development, which was supposed to be a report that was given quarterly or semi-annually or whatever for the $60,000 that you all decided to give the Chamber of Commerce to allow them to keep operating since they're incompetently enough, incapable of raising enough money to operate on their own. Thirdly, I raised the issue about a noise ordinance and problems related to my particular neighborhood with noise. And also a question about the the theft of thousands of dollars of equipment from the Public Works Department 2 nights before the hurricane. So I asked that question on November 4th, and our esteemed village manager was incapable or refused or decided not to answer any of those questions. Several days later, I received an email from Councilman Metz, which is what I read from, and he told me that you raised some important issues and questions at last night's council meeting, and I'll do what I can to get answers. I mistakenly assumed when he sent me that he would forward this email to the village manager and say, hey, Tom, could you have some answers on these questions at the next meeting? Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the next meeting, and when I did, when I managed to look at the video, Councilman Metz either had a senior moment of his own, similar to the one I had had on the first night, or didn't bother to prep for the meeting because he couldn't really make a good presentation about what the 4 questions were that I had asked on that night. Again, but he did ask the village manager to respond to that. So come last month's meeting, nothing was said, nothing was answered, nothing was raised, a complete blank. So here I am in January. So I think everybody in this room, everybody watching, everybody in this village would like to know, what was the cost of the hurricane? Every other community in Miami-Dade County, I believe, has notified their residents of what it cost them in tax dollars for the cost of the hurricane cleanup. Secondly, what happened to the theft of the equipment from the Public Works? Was it recovered? Did you get insurance money for it? What happened here? Was the case closed? Is it being investigated? Is it being forgotten? Thirdly, the issue of this Chamber of Commerce. You people are giving these guys $60,000.
Excuse me, Mr. Crespo, your time is up.
Hustle.
Your time's up. Thank you
There
very
you
much,
go.
Mr. Crespo.
Time's up.
Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Francisco Marrama. I live in 12125 Northeast Miami Court, close to here. We are very interested in the location that is in 9636 2nd Avenue right here to try to open a preschool. We would like to know if there is any way that we can open it or get the use for it, because we talked with the ownership and they say that most of the license or the uses are blocked for whatever reason. The city is not decided for restaurants or something else. So we would like to know if it's possible and just go on with the project.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, council people. Victor Bruce, 370 Northeast 101st Street. I'm here to show my continued support on the RMA guidelines and the changes to the zoning. The architectural guidelines as far as design guidelines and the parking. I also want to reiterate that the discussion of changing uses or setting uses at the lower level for retail and restaurant offices on the upper levels goes in line with the whole sewer installation. I don't know if everybody knows, with the septic systems, if somebody wanted to put a restaurant, they could only put a restaurant where there was a restaurant before. Put a sewer, it opens the door to putting restaurants anywhere. So it's kind of counterintuitive not to follow that train of thought and having restaurants and retail on the bottom level, having offices on the upper level. To me, it makes a lot of sense. Also, restaurants, no parking for all buildings, not just existing buildings. I think we have mentioned that before. And as far as Line Bike, I support it. I saw a lot of people riding bicycles and during the holidays. And please don't cancel it, 'cause I have a balance of about $20. So.
Credit balance, yeah.
Nice.
That's fun.
Hello. Adam Rice, 149 Northwest 97th Street. 2 questions, and you guys may have the answer, but the sewer system that was put in, is there a deadline for businesses to hook up to this? Because we live on 97th Street where it came down our street, and I see no benefit as of yet to this system. I mean, is it going to happen, or all these businesses are there, and all this money's been spent, and it doesn't seem like anything's going on with it. Also, we live on 97th Street. We have a house that's 190 Northwest 97th Street. About 2 weeks ago, the building department came in and put a stop order on the house. They were putting a tarp on the roof. 2 days later, the tag was gone. Called the building department, emailed and called, no response, and the stop order's still gone. So, I mean, I was told to call if something happened, and the building, I mean, there's rats. The place needs to be demolished, and nothing's being done. Tom's known about this for years. It's an abandoned structure that's just fallen to pieces, giving us all bad, I mean, it's the worst house on the entire block, and nothing's being done. They put a little sticker on it, and 2 days later, whoever owns it pulls it off, and it sits there and continues to rot. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? So, and just for the benefit of the audience, I know that there's a lot of first-time faces here. This is the opportunity for public comment during the meeting. If you want to comment on any of the items, this is your chance, with the exception of the stuff that's on public hearing on second reading. So if any of you want to speak on any of these items, with the exception of the stuff that's on second reading, now is your shot. So, all right. Okay.
I just got here, I'm sorry I'm late, so I don't know, is this the second reading for the ordinance?
No. It'll
Okay.
be on first reading.
So
tonight.
I just want to reiterate my name is Todd Leone. I live at 284 Northeast 96th Street. I own 2 buildings here in downtown Miami Shores. I just want to reiterate what I said before was not to take away the property rights of, the commercial contingent here, or the property rights of the commercial property owners, that whatever the space is zoned for now should be able to remain. If it's an office space, it should be able to remain that until such time as it is changed. Then I think, and there should be no time limit. It's important. It's not easy to rent office space here, and there should be no time limit. But if there is a time limit, it's got to be extended more than 6 months, or it could very well bankrupt this town. I'm all for having restaurants here. But the way that this ordinance reads is that it'll pluck all of the tenants out of this place, and we'll have a ghost town again. And I really don't want to see that. The town, I think, is doing well, and I think that if we can do it slowly, and I think we can have a very successful town by bringing, restaurants. But as the way I read this ordinance, and what this board or whoever wrote this ordinance thinks, that restaurants are going to line up side by side and lay out a couple $100,000 for each storefront is ludicrous. That's not going to happen, and it's not. And this is easily a 10-year deal. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. So we got to do it slowly and cautiously. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we are going to close public comment.
Next item is 5A, approval of the December 5th, 2017 Village Council meeting minutes. Mr. Mayor, I've provided the Village Council with updated minutes to reflect a minor change on page 4, item 9C, to now reflect the vote for the discussion and possible action regarding moving the date of the second meeting in January.
Okay.
I'd like to move the minutes as amended.
Do we have all right, Councilman Birch?
You want to have to close that door?
Yeah, can we close that door? That'd be great. Thanks so much. Councilwoman Birch has made a motion that we adopt the minutes as amended. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Next item is 6A, appeal to the Village Council. An appeal of a decision by the Planning and Zoning Board regarding the denial of request for a variance to allow for a 6-foot fence along the front of the north property line of 1300 Northeast 94th Street. The appellants are Christian Bernard and Emmanuel Bernard McGee.
Mr. Manager, do we want to have the Planning and Zoning Director introduce the item or the council? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great.
No. This is limited.
That's okay. No, I'm good. I've got plenty of room. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. The item before you was heard by the Planning and Zoning Board last month. The applicants brought forward a request for a fence located in what is their front yard. The board voted 4-1 against the item. In their opinion, the application did not meet the requirements of the actual variance criteria. I'm just going to spend a couple minutes and go through to make you familiar with the request and the application. So basically, all properties within the village have a 25-foot front yard setback approximately. And the current code as written prevents or limits the maximum height of the fence in that area to 3.5 feet. And that's something that's universally applied throughout the village, and it was the basis for the request that you have in front of you. Here you can see an aerial view of the property in question. It is specifically, their property is the corner lot that's here. The yellow stripes that just appeared there are the equivalent of what is considered the front yards of the properties on the block. So as you go down the block, this area that you see in yellow is the front yards of all of the properties located along the street and the orientation of those properties. So again, you have the front yards on both the north and the south sides of the streets, which are shown here. And again, that's the 25 feet that was reflected and shown. This is the subject property that's shown in blue. So again, you can see the yellow stripe and 25 feet in the front yard, and again, the subject property. So moving forward, this gives you an idea of dimensions and linear distances of the request. So the property itself on the north side, the area of the request is in red. The request is for a 6-foot fence on the area shown. It is approximately 105 feet in length along that property line and extends the entire length of the front next to the driveway. So again, what just appeared in front of you here is the area of the yard itself, which is permitted by right to be enclosed with a 6-foot fence. So, you know, the majority of the property, as shown, is permitted to have a 6-foot fence enclosed by right, which would be similar to the property to the west and the property to the north and all of the other properties along the block. It doesn't infringe upon the setback. So the code itself actually talks to, you know, what is permitted and what's not permitted. And the strict interpretation, or what you're actually reviewing this evening, is, does it in fact create a situation where they are unable to have reasonable use of the property? And in your review of it, you're not reviewing the decision of the council, of the planning board. What you're looking at is specifically, not is a fence a good thing or a bad thing, but does the actual request meet the 4 criteria as established by the code? And that's actually what you're reviewing. Not the fence itself or the location of the fence, but the actual criteria, and does it meet the criteria which establishes the need for a variance? In other words, does the property owner have the capacity to have reasonable use of their property? And as shown, and the board believed that the green area on the property was sufficient to meet that criteria, and therefore the applicant didn't meet the 4 criteria as established in the code, and therefore denied the request. And as they're entitled to, the applicant has requested your review of that specific criteria. And these are the 4 criteria. I'll turn it over to the attorney Mr. Serafan to give you the definition because it requires a supermajority vote of the council to overturn the decision of the Planning and Zoning Board, which is a 4/5 vote. In reviewing the actual criteria themselves, it was staff's opinion that the property, in dealing with the first criteria, that the property is not unusual in that it does have a front, a side, an interior side, and a rear. The second criteria, there are no conditions which make it impossible to apply the current code. In other words, they do have reasonable use of the property, with probably 75% being able to be enclosed with a 6-foot fence for privacy. The third variance criteria, as shown in green, the applicant does have reasonable use of the property, and the fourth is a fence in the front yard is a visual detriment to the community. It's inconsistent with the neighborhood, it's inconsistent with the surrounding neighborhood, and does not meet the required criteria. So as a result, failure to meet any of the 4 criteria would result in a disqualification of the request. And staff's opinion, it didn't meet any of the 4 criteria, and therefore staff does not recommend approval of it. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Robertson. I'm sure he can give you a different opinion at this point. And I'd be happy to answer any questions when you get to it at that point.
Can you back it up to the
Sure.
site plan with your green in place? There you go.
Sure.
Thank you.
It's easier.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me be here tonight. My name is Tom Robertson, offices at 200 South Biscayne Boulevard, Suite 850. I'm representing the Bernards in their request.
Excuse me, I'm just going to ask them to move away.
In their request to ask you to overrule Do you want me to proceed while he's outside?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ask you to overrule the decision of your board, wherein they found that a variance from the 3.5 foot would not be acceptable to the village. Let me start out by defining some of this for you so that you can see it. This is 33 feet of waterfront property. They're not asking for a fence along that portion of it. They're asking for a fence only along here. Now, as you can see, this is the waterfront of their property where they come out and play. They have young children. And this picture doesn't show well, and I'm going to give you some pictures. This portion of the house here is not enclosed. It's an outdoor patio. And so bringing a fence from this edge to here leaves an outdoor patio facing a 3.5 foot fence. The 3.5 foot fence is right here. Now, that is a city park right next to it. And this is a very unusual configuration because this is the road and it turns right here. It is the only configuration of its kind. I've got the same thing in a slightly larger, and I apologize, at the hearing we did some drawing on it. This is 94th Street, makes a turn. This is the property. This is your park. So what they want to say is a front yard, but they use it as their backyard, abuts exactly up against your park with a fence this tall. So as you might imagine, with a young wife, 2 young children, they are concerned for both privacy and security to be able to use their backyard and their open barbecue area. They have an outdoor open barbecue area that, yes, has a roof over it, and I'm going to provide you some pictures, but is actually an open area. How do you want me to hand these out?
You got copies for everyone?
Yes.
That'd be great. Make sure before we leave, the clerk gets a copy of everything. Counsel, there's nothing in there that wasn't provided to P&Z, is there?
I don't think so, but I'll provide it now. Just survey.
We can share. We'll share.
The first thing on that is the survey. You'll see from that survey it's exactly identical to what they've got here. And the solution, the reasonable solution that the village is suggesting is that they cut off the usability of this 30 feet from the rest of the yard, from the rest of their backyard. It's like saying to any one of you, go into your backyard, pick 25 feet on any portion of it and cut it off. Because that's then reasonable use of what is your backyard. Yes, legally it's a front yard. But usability-wise, it is a side yard. There's no other place in the village that has this configuration. There is no other place in the village where what is called a front yard fronts onto a park. There are other parks in the city where there are people who abut it. One of them you don't like much, I understand. Lot K. But because those are all sides, they can put a 6-foot fence up for both security and for privacy. There is a house that happens to abut up next to your Optimist's park. That also, because of its configuration, does not need a 3.5 foot. They're allowed to put up a 6-foot fence. Now, you were just told that putting a 6-foot fence in this location would not be consistent with the neighborhood. And I want to show you a picture. This is the house at the other end of the park. This is the park. It has a 6-foot fence. In fact, it has a 6-foot block wall. And so what my clients want to do is have a 6-foot fence at this end of it facing their 6-foot block wall. Nothing different than anybody else. I will point out to you that this side of their house, which would be their front, because they do have the configuration where the house turns, has 6-foot fence. One of the pictures that you have in that grouping is this house, this side of it is 6-foot fences. Now, if you ride around Miami Shores, 6-foot fences and 6-foot walls in fronts of yards are not unusual. Now, I don't know whether that's because nobody enforces or nobody else has attempted to get a variance, but it is not unusual, and you'll see numerous pictures in there. And 2 of the pictures you're going to see in there show a playhouse. That playhouse is sitting right here. So if you say tonight that they may not have a 6-foot fence there, that playhouse either has to go, or this is a pool, there's not really room in here because of the concrete. There's not really a place to put that. So what they are now using as their backyard, where they have a playhouse for their children, you will now be walling off because their reasonable alternative will be to put a 6-foot fence that separates that area from the rest of the backyard. Now, one of the things in there is a plat. And that plat is exactly of this neighborhood. And you will see from the plat, and this is lot number 14, that next to it is a platted lot. That platted lot is specifically for park purposes, but it is platted. The rest of that park is just leftover right-of-way. And so this location is different from anywhere else in Miami Shores because it is directly adjacent to a platted lot that was in fact left open for park purposes. Now, my clients do not have to have a 6-foot fence across the whole front. If it's this body's feeling that in order to have the look of other front yards that the 6-foot fence should terminate somewhere near, that's fine. What they want is the ability to use this backyard, their backyard, with security and with privacy. I find it hard to believe that the reasonable alternative is to cut off 25 feet of their property, which still leaves exposed their outdoor area. I find it hard to believe they say that it's not unique. It is the only location in the village that has that configuration. The only other time there is a curving of a road is the one directly on the other side of it. That side of it does not face the park, and they in fact have a 6-foot fence. One of the pictures you have in there. So when you consider, one of the things you're concerned about with variances is setting a bad precedent. And I know that the village is very well known for its stance on variances. But even where the stance on variances is extremely tough, there are times when the common sense says this should be granted. And I believe this is one of those. I think asking somebody to give up, in order to have safety and security, to ask them to give up 25 feet of their backyard, because it is their backyard. Yes, legally by your code it is a front yard, but it is their backyard. That is how they use it, that is what it's for. To tell them that the playhouse that they currently have for their 2 children needs to be moved, you can no longer use that as space, because it won't be usable. That your open outdoor barbecue area will now be still left exposed, even though you've put in what is the reasonable alternative. It just seems that this is the better way to do it. I would like to ask Ms. Bernard to get up and speak to you for a moment about her concerns for herself and her children at the location if they are not able to do this. I would point out to you that in some of those photographs of the backyard, there's a lot of foliage there. That foliage is yours. It's on the park. If they were to put a hedge behind their fence or in front of their fence, it too must be maintained at 3.5 feet, or they get to violate the code. Now, driving around the village, there's a lot of people who are violating that code, but for them to be in compliance with the law, the fence is 3.5 feet, and any hedge has to be of a similar size. And there are a lot of places in the shores that don't comply with that. So I'm going to ask Ms. Bernard to come up and talk to you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Your name and where you live?
Emmanuel Bernard. I live in 1300 Northeast Miami, Northeast 94th Street. Sorry, I'm very nervous and I don't speak very well English, so
It's okay.
I'm trying.
Tell us about living at your house with a 3.5-foot fence in your backyard.
So, yes, we mostly live in this part of the, I'm taller of the our backyard, and we have this park just next front of us, and there's even a bench there in the park. So the people that stay in the park, they look at us in our backyard, they look at our kids playing, and when we are eating outside, and it's true for our privacy. I don't feel well with this type of configuration. I don't like that people look at my young kids, they are 1 year old and 3 years old, playing outside. And also we even have people coming and they jump our fence because it's very low, and when they are fishing, or even they use our seawall and our dock. So as it's very easy to go in our property, they do it. And we had at least 2 times during the night people trespassing and going to our backyard and spending time in our backyard. So
when you were in your house and somebody came into your backyard in the middle of the night, where were you?
I was in my bedroom here, and it was the middle of the night, but I had just had my baby, so I was feeding, and with the light I couldn't see outside. And then the police came who tell me that they just arrested people going out of Bracket. It was 5 a.m. And after that, when we saw the camera, we saw that they spent an hour on our dog. And so they could see me in the house feeding my baby. So that was the beginning of the feeling that we weren't safe, and even the privacy. A lot of people are on the park, and it's normal, but I don't want them to see us during the day and the night.
When you say you were feeding your baby, how do you feed your baby? Do you have food that you feed the baby, or do you breastfeed your child?
Bottle feed my baby,
Okay.
but it was in my bedroom. Yes, it was 5 a.m., so it wasn't.
Okay. Do you feel comfortable in your with your backyard with the current configuration?
No. Yes, each time we are there, people, and it's normal, they hear us, they hear the kids, so they take a look, because they can. So it's natural, for them, and for us it's not very comfortable.
Thank you. Mr. Bernard does not speak English, and so I'm not going to be presenting him here. He speaks only French. There's not really much more I can say other than they say, is it a reasonable use of your property? When you take off 25 feet, or you say to a young mother, you have to be open to the entire park, I don't think either of those are alternates that are reasonable. And so I do think that this request meets all of the requirements for a variance in order to bring peace to these people, to let them use the house they purchased here in the Shores. And I would encourage you to vote to overrule your board. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you very much, Council. Mr. Village Attorney.
The standard that's set forth for you, and I think Travis mentioned it earlier, is not whether or not you'd like to see these people have the fence that they would prefer. The standard for issuing a variance were the criteria set forth. I'd like to just talk for a couple of minutes about what a variance is and why we have it. Variance is like a stopgap measure. It's like a pressure release. We have rules. The rules have to apply to everyone equally. That's called equal protection under the law. However, on rare occasions, and they are very rare, people are not similarly situated. There's something about a piece of property that requires that the rules just cannot be properly applied to this piece of property. That's one of the elements, a reason why it's impossible to strictly apply the rules to the property. And a variance allows that pressure release, allows that ability to modify the rules for people who are not similarly situated. And therefore, they're not getting a benefit that is denied to others. Here, the request is for a 6-foot fence in what, without dispute, is the front yard. It really doesn't matter how they use it or not. The village requires 25-foot setbacks in the front yard. If this is their backyard, then they're in violation of the setback requirements. The front door faces this way, the entrance is there, the address is there, it's their front yard. So what they're asking for is a 6-foot fence in their front yard. We've told other people they can't have 6-foot fences in their front yard. Now, there may be, in fact, places where there are 6-foot fences in the front yard. They could be in violation of the code, they could be incurring fines, they could have been built without permits. We don't know the situations. But that's not really relevant to the variance, and the issue of whether or not this might be something that would be good for this family is also not relevant to the variance. The question is, did the planning board act unreasonably or in a fashion not in accordance with the purposes of the code in determining that this variance criteria was not met in this case? And that's what you need to decide.
Thank you.
Did I miss anything, Travis?
No. Okay, actually, just for the benefit, I mean, I know where it is, but for the benefit of the folks here in the audience, can you just show them? I think this is important. Where is their front door?
The front door of the property.
And the address is on that street as well. And those are the two primary things that we look at. Actually, there's three. Where's the 25-foot setback? What's the address? And where's the front door? And I don't think council is arguing that legally this is not their front yard. He's saying they use it as if it was a backyard. And they're allowed to do that, but that doesn't mean that everybody who uses it as if it's a backyard gets to put a 6-foot fence around it.
So these, just in case there was any questions or if visually want to see, these pictures were actually taken today, this afternoon, and those show the front of the property currently in its configuration. That is the hedge that they were referring to in the current existing fence. That's a picture along the street, and that's a picture of the edge where it abuts the park and where there's currently, obviously you can see the spoke of the wheel and it's 6 feet. So there is a visual barrier as well as a fencing barrier currently there, existing as of today. So, for your consideration. But if there's any other questions, just wanted to.
Councilman?
Mr. Mayor, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Kendall, could you give me some clarification? I've heard maybe it was council talk about this other property which would be at the north end of the park. I think it's 9701 Northeast 13 Ave.
Correct.
What's
The
going
property
on
that the councilman referred to is in fact at the other end of the park. However, the area where they do have the wall is their backyard. It's in the rear of the property. The property is similarly situated where the area in question, similar to that if you were to look at this picture, if the park were to come here, they have a 6-foot wall along here, which this property would be entitled to do as well if it abutted in the same similar situation. If it were located on the other end of the park and the street ended here, the front door of that property itself faces north the same as this does, and the property in question could have a 6-foot wall here, which is what they do currently have.
So the difference is the two houses are, I guess, similarly situated in terms of one's at the north, one's at the south, right?
That's correct.
And so the one at the north does have a large 6-foot wall, block
Yes,
wall.
in their rear yard.
And these petitioners want to do a 6-foot fence on theirs, but they're unable to do it because it's being considered their front yard rather than their backyard.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, but we're certain that the house at the north does have a 6-foot wall.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Just had a question for
Councilman.
Mr. Kendall.
Sure.
The last slide you showed with the site plan larger? Yes, that one. All right, so the red line, it says, is the location of the request. So it shows the fence coming along the waterfront for 25 feet?
There's currently a fence there.
Okay, is that 6 foot?
No, it's approximately 4 feet.
Okay.
There's no fence there currently along the waterfront.
Okay.
It goes.
There's actually a metal fence there's a metal picket fence along the water currently.
And does it terminate there?
It ends in where this picture, yes, it ends in that spoke that I showed you in the picture currently.
Oh, but the backside, trailing back towards the house is there?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, the piece along the
All
waterfront.
along this, there's currently a 4-foot metal picket fence that goes and terminates at the corner.
That's the waterfront. There's
Yes.
no fence there.
No, there's a
fence to protect the from
There's currently a metal picket fence there.
There's a pool barrier,
Okay.
like you would have for young children.
Okay, so they want to make that portion in red 6 foot where it's 4 foot now?
Yes.
That's not the request.
No.
To be clear, if it sounds like that in our application, that is not. It is just the part parallel to the.
Can you trace it?
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Just east-west is what you're saying.
We are not asking for this portion here.
Okay.
We are asking for this portion, and if you decide that you want it to terminate somewhere along here and go from there on that's 3.5 feet, we have no problem with that. What they are looking for solely to have security and safety, privacy in their backyard.
Do you have any elevations that would show what a 6 foot fence would look like along there?
Probably the closest that we have would be this picture. And here you can see a 3.5-foot fence which is existing. And then it sort of goes up a little bit, which is kind of difficult to see, to the 4 foot. And then this is approximately 6 feet. So the top of the spokes would be 6 feet. just for perspective. And that's obviously not a fence, but that would be, would you agree?
Yes.
Okay.
Identical to the one to the north.
So, I have a question, and I think this is directed at council rather than Travis. No, but is there a primary concern here, privacy versus security? I mean, if there was a way to keep that area super private versus, you know, having the security of a 6-foot fence, would that be amenable?
Privacy is a huge component. There's no
Okay.
question of that. The problem is that the same regulations with respect to fence apply to hedging, which is your other screening.
No, well, we modified our ordinance last year for high-traffic streets to allow for 6-foot hedges in the front yard. We did not include this street when we named out those high-traffic streets. So, other questions, council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, or does anyone else want to speak first? Okay. I mean, these are the most difficult questions that come up. I remember I sat on the Planning and Zoning Board, and my first meeting, there was a variance application, and Richard remembers that, and I actually made the motion to grant the variance, and it was passed by a slim margin. And I was told that was probably the first variance that was granted in 20 years in this village. And I'm not sure that any variance has been granted since that one. And I was, of course, accused of giving it to humanitarian type reasons for doing that. So I understand and I, you know, sympathize and empathize with these things. And from my perspective, perhaps maybe the solution, maybe it doesn't meet the legal criteria. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. But maybe there's arguments that it does, it doesn't. Maybe it's a code change. Maybe it's something that we can do to include this street in the high traffic streets, or include, you know, parcels that are next to city parks, specific ones, that would allow them to have a solution with, I don't know, some sort of thorny hedge, but still not changing the code or granting a variance, which would set a precedent. So those are my thoughts.
Other thoughts, council?
Oh, I have thoughts.
Please share.
And I wrote my thoughts down because I feel very strongly that we should allow this variance. And so since I wrote it down, I thought it would be a little bit easier to make sure that I go through the points that I believe are affected here that might not have been brought up in front of planning and zoning, strictly for, well, several, because of the reasons that the attorney said, that we're supposed to be narrowly focused, and that we're supposed to take this very seriously, because after all, we had to take it first in this meeting. That's what's required, is that we look very carefully at what P&Z did, and we have a very strong admiration for the work that they do. And I'd like to say that at the outset, because I do have that feeling, and I do understand that these variances are scarce as hen's teeth in the village, and I do respect that. And so, but I feel very strongly because I understand what they're trying to do, and I think there are some different reasons why we should grant this variance. There are plenty of attorneys' views on the matter, and I'm surrounded by attorneys. So I'd like to take the view of the average resident in Miami Shores. Certainly the argument has been made that the property, oh, sorry, did I get this? Okay. The property is unusually situated. And in my view, that has merit. We have listened to the views of nearby neighbors as well, as I understand, and I have listened to the views of nearby neighbors. The property that is similarly but not identically situated at the north end of the park is not along the street, even though you can drive right up to it in your car. They have an existing 6-foot wall. I have a picture of that in case you'd like to see it, because I think that bookend property bears strongly on this decision. From a resident's point of view, by allowing that variance, you are not affecting strict code measures that protect a resident's home values and rights. Perhaps this appeal to council gives us the opportunity to examine issues not normally considered in the scope of the planning board. To me, these issues are privacy, traffic, and resiliency. Privacy has been under consideration by the council over the past 2.5 years. The spirit of the changes made to Section 518 of the Village Code of Ordinances reflect this. Now property owners along busy streets in the shores can have higher fences and hedges in their front yards. Personally, I do not like the look of this change, but this is not about personal taste. A lot of what we heard was a deep desire for privacy by the resident, as well as the effect that increased traffic has had on their quiet enjoyment. By extension, you can make the argument in favor of granting the variance to these homeowners because in my conversations with the residents near Bayfront Park, they state that the usage increase in this small park of ours has been dramatic over the years. Tourist websites have from time to time advised its public access to the bay and tranquil view. Yes, we own it and can enforce the rules, but the reality of a 24/7 open space park is that the nearby homeowner is frequently challenged for their privacy and safety. The reality is a lot of usage by residents of Miami Shores Village as well as non-residents who do frequently fail to observe the hours and rules, some of which can be cured by Miami Shores Police Department, rapid response, and some not. I recently attended day one of the Climate Change Summit just a few weeks ago, where I was able to speak out in favor of Florida Forever funding by the 2018 legislature. At the summit, the reality of resiliency challenges for municipalities coming just weeks after Hurricane Irma were presented. When I think of these challenges, I think of our 800+ linear foot of seawall at our park that is greater than 30 years old. What if this gives way and these appealing homeowners whose seawall has been improved and raised in 2017, according to the record, the home record, what if our seawall, our 30-year-old seawall, should give way? What's going to happen? These people are therefore, when we deny this variance, are being denied a retaining wall. What is a retaining wall? A retaining wall is there to protect that residence from encroachment by the collapse of the neighboring walls. And that is what FEMA is encouraging and allowing loans through the Small Business Administration, federal loans, for people to install these retaining walls. This way, they begin to install their retaining wall right at the edge of their property, which is right at the edge of our property, our Miami Shores Village Linear Park. Another thing about the Code of Ordinances, Section 18.4C, states that a fence or wall can be 12 feet or as required for fences serving village-owned parks. That means we can build a 12-foot wall and they can't. The village can build a 12-foot wall there and the homeowner cannot. Why does that make sense? In the last several weeks, I personally have lived through what the lack of a retaining wall can mean to a bayfront property, And it is an extremely difficult, complex, and costly measure. And I would like to inform the council, in case they haven't read the latest release of the FEMA rules for December 31st, 2017, that more and more is going to be foisted upon municipalities who have repetitively failing dwellings. Now, and with me, I brought the map that we saw a month ago at our council meeting that showed where the seawall breaches are. Okay. I'm done, but I do have the picture of the bookend residence with me. If I could enter that into the record and just pass it down, you can actually see what the other end looks like. This is it. And just one more thing I might say, Mr. Vice Mayor, the owner of that property said that you visited it after the hurricane. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and you remarked on the resiliency of that home during a direct hit from Hurricane Irma and the multiple foot wave action that was felt for many hours on that property. Okay, just want to mention.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Councilman? Okay. Thank you, Councilwoman. Further comment?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman?
I agree with all the statements made by Councilwoman Birch, and I certainly feel for the property owners. My concern is that if we grant this variance, that the other houses facing the park are going to be in here wanting to put up 6-foot fences, perhaps. And if one of them does ask for that, I think this village would be hard-pressed to say no. I would like to find a code amendment solution that would give them the relief that they're seeking, some form of relief, without causing a precedent that could be very problematic for the waterfront parcels over there. I mean, that's just my opinion. And from a legal standpoint, I don't know if the attorney wants to comment on that as a precedent, but if I were a zoning attorney representing an owner, I think I'd be making, and I was representing one of the properties facing the park, I think I'd have a pretty good argument that you can't deny my variance.
If it is the will of this council, it's certainly doable to craft a zoning code amendment allowing a 6-foot hedge, for example, on that portion of properties which abut a village park, or even, you can even make it more specific, abut a platted village park. I mean, that's all doable. That doesn't set a precedent, it sets a law.
Correct. No, I was thinking that we were setting a precedent if if we grant it and the other folks came in along the street there, that their front yards face the park.
I won't comment on whether or not it's a legal precedent, but I will say from a practical standpoint, if this is granted, I see all sorts of follow-up applications.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Council, further comments?
Yes.
Council? Yep.
I was there. I looked at Mr. and Mrs. Bernard's property, and they don't have any privacy, and I don't think that's right. However, we are only a system of rules and laws. Variances are guided by that, and what they have submitted does not meet the criteria for a variance. However, I do agree with Mr. Zelkowitz, or Councilman Zelkowitz, and I think Mr. Mayor, and I obviously Councilwoman Birch, that we want to help them. So I think the right way, and I'm sure their counsel would inform them of what we're saying and explain it and break it down, is to change the law to allow you to do it in a legal manner. Mr. Kendall, Mr. Seraphin have articulated why I don't think your application should be granted, but we do want to get you what we feel would be appropriate, especially when you just break it down, put the laws aside, and just look at your property compared to the property at the north. It just doesn't seem right. But the right answer is not to break our rules. It's to create a rule which would accommodate fairness, and that's what I would suggest.
Thank you, Councilman. Further comment?
Well,
Councilwoman?
during this creative solution that's going to be crafted by Mr. Kendall and Mr. Seraphin, should we agree to this, is poured concrete or a concrete wall? Could that be part of it, or are we thinking it strictly in terms of vegetation?
Whatever gets 3 votes of you guys to change the code, that's what it'll be. We don't have a preference either way. I was interested by your comments about the retaining wall, which I will confess I don't 100% understand, but I will before it comes back.
Council, did you want to comment?
If I might, if you are thinking of a code-based solution, your code allows that any place that a property abuts another property becomes a side yard regardless. And that's how the property that is directly north is able to have their 6-foot fence on the other side of their property, is because they are directly next to a lot with a house. That rule does not apply to my client because they are next to a lot that does not have a house. But if instead you were to say that anywhere a park abuts directly a property, that portion of the property will be considered a side yard, it then is no longer a front yard for the portion of it that they want to place their fence. And so an ordinance that says that any portion of a property that directly abuts a park shall be considered a side yard is in compliance with the rest of your ordinance because of your code, because any place else where 2 lots abut is considered a side yard regardless of the configuration. And that would allow them to have their fence without having a variance.
I simply disagree with council. Maybe I'm missing something, but every house, practically every house in the village, their front yard abuts another plot. So if what we're talking about is a fence, I mean, there are a lot of things that are tied to front yards. Rather than saying that a front yard becomes a side yard, if we're talking about a fence or a wall, I'd rather we be specific as to that and keep it narrow. Our laws come and go, but the laws of unintended consequences go on forever. So I'd try to keep it as narrow as possible.
Okay.
If I might, this is the house at the other end. This is the side of it facing away from the park. For this portion of it, it is considered the front yard. I'm sorry, where's the parking lot? This is the park. Okay, got it. Yeah. This is their incoming road. It curves. This is the house next door to them. For here on, it's considered a side yard.
Yep.
And that's true anywhere you have this type of configuration. You don't, except for these 2 locations.
Yep.
And I think you can ask your zoning director that he will tell you from here on, this is considered a side yard. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So you create the exact circumstance on the other end by saying that where a house abuts, you don't even have to say park. You can say directly abuts another property. I think park's probably going to limit it the most. And if you want to say a platted park, because that really limits it to this, but that allows them to consider the side yard as a side yard and put their fence there. So if a legislative solution is what you're considering, I would encourage you to look at it from that standpoint.
If what we're talking about is a fence or a wall, I think we should legislate with regard to a fence or a wall. If we're talking about something else, I'd like to know what.
Okay. I do.
I'll follow you, but I would certainly love it if you would put together something that we could use as a motion that would be accurate to what you and Mr. Kendall are going to undertake here.
I would suggest 2 motions, if I'm reading the will of the council correctly, and I'm not sure I am, but if it's your desire to deny the variance, but instruct staff to bring forward a proposed code amendment to facilitate, and I'll leave it to whoever makes the motion, permission for either a wall or a fence or both on that portion of a property that abuts a platted lot, we can certainly do that. And if anyone needs help in wording that, I can do it.
Further comments, questions? I'd like to say something. So I think this has been implied, but I am deeply sympathetic to your situation. I have been by, I live not far from there. You have absolutely no privacy, I get it. It's also a challenge for me because it is your front yard, but it is uniquely situated against the park. In my mind, this does not meet the threshold for a variance legally, and I just am not comfortable granting it under those circumstances, but I am open to finding another solution. So Anyway, Councilwoman, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I wanted to try the motion, but.
Okay.
Okay, so the first motion would be to deny the variance.
You can make it all in one motion.
Okay.
To deny the variance and instruct staff to bring forward
Instruct.
a proposed code amendment permitting, you'll have to fill in the blank, we're talking walls, fences, both,
Hedges.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah.
Mr. Vice Mayor, did you have something to add?
No,
before we get into the
no.
motion? Okay.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say for the motion, I think we want to make sure we're very specific, because I understand what you're saying about abutting, because then I could put a 6-foot wall right up to the street between my house and the neighbor's house. So I think we need to say very specifically when it's, adjacent to the public park.
Yeah, that portion, I'll tell you what, we'll bring forward with all three options, being wall, hedge, or fence,
Mhm.
for that portion of a property that abuts a platted park in the village. Does that work for everyone?
Yes, thank you.
Madam Clerk, are you with us?
Yes, so noted.
Thank you.
So that's my motion.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, great. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion on the item? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Good work, council.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Council. Appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item is 7A, an ordinance of the Miami Shores Village Council adopting Division 22, Miami Shores Downtown District, Appendix A, zoning contained in the Code of Ordinances of Miami Shores Village, Florida, providing for the adoption of the Architectural Design Manual and zoning code regulation to implement the manual, setting forth those conditions, creating, defining, and regulating the Miami Shores Downtown District as an overlay, amending the list of permitted uses, and amending the partial list of uses deemed to not be included in the list of permitted uses in the B1 district located within the Miami Shores Downtown District, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. Staff on this item is the Planning and Zoning Director, and Mr. Mayor, this is a public hearing item.
Okay, great. I'd like to open this, should we open up for public comment first? Is this a public?
No, it's on second.
Second reading, on second reading. Because we,
It's a public hearing, but we don't take them for a second.
okay, yeah, we'll take it a second. Okay. Mr. Kevin?
Mayor Glenn. Okay, so, Mr. DeQuisto, obviously, you all had a discussion. This was discussed previously, and there was some questions by council. Staff was directed to go back and draft some changes, which have been proposed to you. At this point, the ordinance has not been updated because council needs to make a decision as to the direction which they wish to follow. And sort of in summary, staff's request to you would be direction based upon whether the item is supported or not. If council chooses sort of as step one to support the item, then staff would ask council to make a decision on the following items. The first was specifically the duration of time for the accumulation of costs associated with repairs, whether that be 1 or 5 years to reach the 50% threshold. That's one item which was to be considered by you. And the second major issue is the period of time between 6, 12, or 18 months having to do with the expiration of the legal nonconformity of the use itself if the item is moved forward. So there are a few other smaller changes which staff would bring forward with the ordinance itself if council so chooses to support the item, and obviously that would be brought back again, date certain at first reading. But again, if you could make the decision on the overall picture, and then kind of get into it a little bit on the second and third item, and if you get to that point, then staff will bring the resolution, the ordinance to you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kendall. Councilman?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I know either it was back on November 21 or even October 3rd we had discussion, and I thought it was set, we had asked maybe village manager and maybe vice mayor or somebody to have a meeting with stakeholders, building owners, business owners, to get a feel of maybe working out some sort of middle ground, or just to have some idea of how we could pretty much maybe move forward with everybody on board. Did that occur, or, because I haven't seen it?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Vice Mayor. Yep.
So, sorry, I thought we had discussed it a little bit at the last meeting, so my apologies. Basically, we had a number of meetings, and I'll let Tom talk about the ones where I wasn't there. But we did meet with, excuse me, I can't believe I'm forgetting her name right now. Teresa, who's the owner of the one, and she was pretty much broadly against it. We also spoke to the person representing the property management company at the 9999 building. Thank you. And they had some specific issues, but I think we were able to provide them with a little better understanding of how it worked. And then I think also I'd had some discussions with Mr. Leone, which his concerns were largely addressed here, extending it to 18 months. And then I'll let Tom briefly mention, they also were able to have a meeting with a couple other property owners who were broadly supportive of it as it was written today, but I'll let Mr. Manager, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, in my discussions with the property owners downtown, there was no middle ground, in my opinion. They either loved it or they hated it. And there was nothing that we were going to say or do that was going to change anybody's mind that was against it. There were several property owners that I have attempted to contact numerous times and just haven't responded. I've even talked to a couple of, I will call them administrative assistants of the owners that promised me they would promptly get back to me, and I still haven't heard from them. So there are some folks that just chose not to weigh in on this at all.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Council, further comments?
Okay, yeah.
Councilwoman.
Yes. Well, I'm just looking at item 1 on the staff's report here, and speaking about parking distance from downtown, and I was the one that said that I thought it should be a quarter mile rather than a half mile, and I had the map here of what that would look like, and it was fresh in my mind, all these complaints we were getting about Lime bikes being on swales far afield, and I thought that everyone was going to complain. But then I started thinking about where a valet or where off-site parking within a half mile of the downtown district where, let's say, a valet would choose to park a car. And I realized that by going a quarter mile, you're really squeezing out some parking lots that might otherwise be eligible for use by. So I was wondering if we could put that back at a half mile, and how the feeling was about that.
Council, any comment on that issue in particular? No? Okay, so by consensus, let's keep that in our back pocket and let's move forward on the other issues. There was another issue that was raised that before we get into the real, and actually I'm going to ask Mr. Kendall to come up for this one maybe, that was raised by Mr. Bruce, and we talked about it at the last meeting, which was the parking requirement for restaurants specifically. Modified restaurants versus new restaurants. Are they treated differently under this iteration of the code?
Yes, they are. The current code, as passed, requires new restaurants, new construction, to actually provide 100% of the required parking on site. In other words, they have to have a parking lot associated with the building, whereas any currently existing buildings are relieved of that requirement.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So I guess let's go right to the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the use issue. and how the council feels about the use issue staying in this ordinance.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Vice Mayor.
With the extension to 18 months to allow for, well, with an existing lawful non-compliant use, non-conforming use, as while that's maintained while it's occupied, plus an 18-month window to replace that, I would fully support it.
Great, thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Other comments, issues, questions?
Well, seeing as no one else
Councilman.
is
Yep.
going to speak, again, and going back to the beginning of this whole process, which was something I actually ran on in my campaign, was to have some design criteria for downtown, to have uniformity, to make it look like a village, and not have haphazard architectural types. And that was my intention in hiring RMA and having them put together a design criteria manual. And I actually brought to this village a design criteria manual that was done in connection with another project in Miramar that I thought was very helpful. I in no way, shape, or form condoned eliminating certain types of uses from the zoning code in the hopes that other uses that might be more attractive, more lucrative, would come and replace them. And I heard people get up and speak earlier, they're in support of the RMA report, and maybe I don't remember, maybe it's in there, but I don't know if RMA actually suggested eliminating the uses. Okay, well, I disagree with that. It wasn't my intent. I haven't seen anything, and maybe there is something, maybe you have something, Mr. Mayor, maybe the zoning director, that says that that works, that eliminating certain types of uses will attract other types of uses. All right, I'm a firm believer in the market. If someone wants to open a restaurant, Miami Shores, they can open up a restaurant, Miami Shores. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I don't know if we have any spaces that are over 5,000 square feet, that'll have over 200 seats, that'll allow them to have a quota license, to have the hard liquor downtown. They'd have to go out and buy one for a couple $100,000. So, again, and I heard the Vice Mayor say that he's supportive of it because now we have an 18-month, non-conforming use, basically amelioration provision. At the end of the day, we're not the ones making the investment in downtown. Okay, the property owners are. They came here. I can't see a property owner with a one-story building wanting this. I mean, I see we're eliminating banking offices. Does that include a bank? Does that include a bank? Okay, so you can't have banks anymore downtown on the first floor of a building. I mean, I don't think that that's the way that we want downtown to be, so someone has to move their bank upstairs. I like having my children's pediatrician downtown. That's where their doctor is. That's where I take them. I like having their dentist downtown. The building that the Kakamizis built is beautiful. So and it has offices in it, of course. So I don't see anything, I haven't seen any data or report that says getting rid of offices in Miami Shores is going to attract retail and restaurants. I mean, look what happens to retail now. Macy's is closing in downtown. Okay? Retail is not what it used to be. Shopping's done online. And I would rather keep what we have and try to fill in the spaces that open up than to just tell these people they got to go away. And I'm not even going to get into the legal aspect of it, because I've received calls from attorneys already who aren't here because they want this to pass. They're waiting. They're waiting for it to pass. So that's my opinion. I'm in full support of the ordinance, the parking at half a mile, but 548 subsection 3, I can't abide by it. I just can't. So I would fully support the ordinance, less that subsection.
Thank you,
Mr.
Councilman.
Mayor.
Other comments?
Well, Councilman Zelkowitz and I were on the same page when it came to hiring RMA, to taking their suggestions. These are their suggestions. This is part of their set of suggestions. And it also came from a trip that Mr. DeQuesto made to the Main Street Conference, where it was said, and it didn't happen right away, it happened over a period of 10 years. It said that the uses would eventually follow the guidelines that you set. I liked what RMA said when they said the goals of the Architectural Design Manual are supported by MShores downtown district development and first floor uses that encourage active uses at street level. I like that. Generate pedestrian activity throughout the day and in the evening. A bank doesn't. Restrict purely daytime uses from locating at street level. To me, it makes sense because it gives teeth to something that you're trying to accomplish. And yes, it's long-term. So now we've said, okay, these incompatible uses are grandfathered in now. Let's take Mr. Harkey that we heard from in the last meeting. He has a ground floor, street front attorney's office. He can have that attorney's office from ad infinitum. He doesn't have to make any changes to that based on us passing this. But in the future, and for redesigns, it gives the same guidelines that the design manual gives to give it a uniform look. It gives to all of the residents who are saying, yes, let's make some room for restaurant and retail. Now, one thing that staff did not address that was mentioned a couple times during the meeting a month ago was percentages, that a percentage of a certain type of property would be permitted. And, I know that must have seemed to staff like a big can of worms, so they didn't really address it in this, in what they presented now. But it is a possible solution to having 5 banks downtown. So maybe as we go forward, we need to look more carefully. I know North Miami, I know other cities have used the percentage rule to prevent having a plethora of a certain type of business. But the intent is there. It's not all trying to name incompatible uses. It's trying to name an intent going forward.
Great. Thank you, Councilwoman. Other comments?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I wholeheartedly agree with Councilman Zelkowitz. The best way I can describe it is, I don't know if Todd Leone's still here, but Todd owns the 2 buildings. I've met with him, I've listened to him, and I fully disagree with his business model. I don't like his business model. And Todd can come up and say I'm wrong, but he doesn't want to spend money on the building, right? He likes to collect checks, but that's his right. I would love to see him tear down the building, go up 3 stories, put retail restaurant on 1, offices on 2, and build some lofts or some apartments on 3. But I'm not Todd. It's his right. He owns the property. And that's one of the things we found our this country on. It's your right to do it. I feel restricting his or anybody else's use is wrong. I want to see restaurants and retail like everybody else. And those of you who know my history, that's all I've been preaching for years. But this is not the way to do it. So I agree with Councilman Zelkowitz of striking that section about non-permitted and non-conforming uses. I think it's 548. The market will bear itself out. We already have some people who purchase properties and are redeveloping them. Maybe if Todd's not willing to do it or other people aren't willing to do it, somebody will come in and buy them. If there's some successful wine bars and restaurants who open here, then the market will follow. But this isn't the way to do it.
Mr.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Vice Mayor.
And I actually completely understand where you guys are coming from, but I think it's important to remember that we do, as communities, regulate the use of land and regulate the use of it on a normal basis. And I'm sure there's some people here that would like to do, gun shop, porn store, pot dispensary, but we don't allow that. And I think it's just important to keep that in mind. That, and I completely understand, where both of you are coming from with that, but just to keep in mind that we have a, also responsibility, to our community to help shape it in the way that they expect us to. That's all. Might not need to say this.
I know you haven't gotten a chance to speak, Mr. Mayor.
That's okay. I'd like to
I
listen to
mean,
everybody
I just
talk.
have to respond. I mean, with all due respect, yes, of course, that's their purpose, is to have a zoning code to regulate the use of property and the intensity of use. But there are certain limits as to how far we can go. All right? Mr. Harkey's office, okay? Mr. Harkey retires, okay? He can't sell this office to another law firm. He's got to change the entire property. The valuation of the building may be going down because of that today, or excuse me, on second reading. I just, that's why there's laws like the Burt Harris Act. I mean, we can regulate, but we have to be reasonable, and we can't take away value. I've heard nothing on the record that says that this law is not going to do that, and I feel very uncomfortable that if we adopt this ordinance, that we're going to be in lawsuits with people. And that's not our job. Our job is to do things the right way, in accordance with the law. So maybe there's some compromise. Maybe if someone's knocking down a building and they're building a new building, they have to comply with this. No offices on the first floor. But telling somebody who's got a building that because my tenant left, I can't have another office use come in, or the bank has to leave. I mean, to me, that's setting ourselves up for failure. We have a small downtown. The economy is fragile. It is coming back. And I don't think places like North Miami and larger cities who have larger downtowns suffer from the same sort of, not disease, but situation that we suffer from. I don't want to see places go dark. And I'm sure there are other cities that probably have this ordinance, okay? I'm sure that RMA likes to spout its redevelopment type, rhetoric, and I suggested them. I like them. But what works somewhere else may not work here. So, again, from my perspective, I think we need to be very careful when we're just telling people you can't do this, and once it stops, or when the lease is up, you got 18 months or whatever it is. I don't care if it's 18. I don't care if it's 5 years. Okay, it's an issue. It's a valuation issue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No problem. Any other comment before I share my thoughts? Okay. First of all, and I know that you guys, had a back and forth on it, but I do want to echo something that the Vice Mayor said. We tell people all the time what to do with their property. All the time, right? We had an hour on it at the beginning of this meeting, right? I know that there are different circumstances involved here about change of uses and the way it impacts these property owners, and I understand that there's difference, but to act like this is something completely off the wall, I think, is disingenuous. And basically, at 18 months, which is the way this is written now, you can find any legal non-conforming use to find your space that you want. To me, what this does, the way it's currently written, is once it changes, right? If you make the decision to bring something else in, once it changes, it's going to stay that way, right? You can keep it as a legal non-conforming use, basically as long as you want at 18 months. I have concerns that have been echoed and very well articulated by both Councilman Meltz and Councilman Zelkowitz about what we're taking away from them here potentially, the rights that we're taking away potentially. And I have asked the property owners on multiple occasions to tell me what you would like, what additional vested rights you would like in your property in exchange for us, passing this ordinance. And they have been unwilling to offer anything up. I mean, I think we were very clear at the last meeting. We're ready to deal, right? We want this to happen, I think, for the most part, if we could make sure that they felt like they were getting a fair deal. And my issue right now is that, because we haven't passed this off first ordinance, and I think that they think we won't, they're not willing to come to the table and talk about a deal. So, I'm going to support this ordinance for now, the way it's written, with this in there. But, only in the hopes that we can bring those folks to the table to start talking about how we can, make this something they can live with. Well, maybe we can't, but I would like to push them towards the table. So, and maybe I'm naive for thinking that this will, but I'd like to at least see if it'll do so. Because frankly, the only thing I've heard about for 2 election cycles is how badly the residents of this village want to change the mix of the uses downtown, right? And I see dentist office after dentist office open downtown. I hear a preschool going into a prime retail spot. Come on. Nobody in this village wants that, right? And, Macy's may be dead, but Wynwood is thriving. Mimo is thriving. Miami Beach is thriving. Little Havana is thriving. Retail, done right in selective pockets, does very well right in our backyard, right? So, what we don't have, unfortunately, in our community is the curatorial developer types that are willing to take a loss on bringing somebody in with the recognition that it's going to draw other good tenants in that will eventually pay more rent for the other properties that they own. But it is bottom right-hand corner every time. Right? So,
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to interject.
You're out of order. Can you please sit down now?
I just want
please,
that on the
No,
record.
you're out of order. Thank you.
I want it on the record.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yep. Yeah, I sure am.
I appreciate your comments.
Yep.
I mean, I know you feel passionately about this. I think we all do, and I think we're all trying to do what's best for this village. And sometimes we may agree, and sometimes we may disagree. So I would just like to ask the Planning and Zoning Director a quick question. Is there anything in our code right now that prevents a wine bar or craft beer bar or restaurant from opening up downtown?
No, there's not.
Okay. And in response to the issue with the property owners, I mean, with all due respect to them, why would I negotiate against myself? I mean, what are we going to offer them? I guess is the question. What would be something in our ordinance that we could put in? And I'm not asking for an answer. It's like a rhetorical question to appease them from the get-go. I mean, we're asking them, what do you want? I mean, we gave them the free parking already. It's like Monopoly. You give them the free parking. So,
Maybe a railroad.
I think that the sewer, it is a long-term change. But there's nothing from stopping people coming here. I get calls from developers, big developers, who are doing big projects in other cities. What do you want me to do in Miami Shores? And they come here and they look at it and say, it's just too small for me. Wynwood's great. The beach is great. Little Havana's great. But they're all on a much larger scale than us. And I don't want to see our sort of fragile return to prosperity downtown affected unnecessarily. So, maybe it passes on first reading. Maybe we need some more study done. I don't know the answer. I mean, but I do know as an attorney and a land use and zoning attorney, that's why they're not here tonight. Okay? They don't need to tell us. Mr.
Village Attorney.
Mayor, thank you.
No, thank you, Councilman.
Knowing Mr. Crespo's proclivities, I would recommend at this point that you open it up to public comment, because no matter what he has to say, it'll be quicker and less painful than whatever he plans to do if he doesn't get to talk.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and open this item up for public comment.
I only wanted to say that I think it's important that there be a public comment on the first reading of an ordinance. Because this is the time, after hearing the debate, when people can have actual input based on information that they've been provided. All too often, when you have a second reading ability to speak, it's because the decision's already been made and the vote's just about done. That's the only concern I have. I have a concern about the process. We should be allowed to speak on first reading of ordinances, all right?
Any other public comment on the first reading of this ordinance? No? Yep.
Sorry.
Come on up.
With this ordinance, I haven't read it, of course. What is the deal with the sewer system? I mean, I know that, I keep bringing this up, but I mean, I see these businesses, I see all this money that was spent on this. Is there deadlines or anything to get these businesses to go into this?
So, unfortunately, it's not question and answer for this part,
Right.
but if you stick around to the end, I'll tell you all about it. Tom will tell you about it. I'll take all the time you want.
Okay.
Okay? Other questions, comments? Oh, come on up.
Thank you. I'd like to support what Mr. Crespo said. I think it is a good idea to allow for comments on that first reading after council has an opportunity to have a discussion. I think it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Further comment? Questions? Well, I can't answer questions, but comments. Okay. We're going to close the public hearing on this ordinance. We'll come back to the ordinance itself. So, folks, the way I see it, we got three main issues that I'd like to go through, if possible. So, does anybody have any objection other than those that are objecting overall to the uses portion of the ordinance, of the new definition of office and training facility that's in, training facility that's in there that's been proposed? Let's go through that one first. Has everybody looked at training facility? Yeah, Councilwoman?
I think it's fine.
Okay. Okay. All right, so, I'm gonna make a motion to move this ordinance as presented, with the 18-month for legal non-conforming use clause, and with the 5-year clause that was presented as well for upgrading the building. So I'll make that motion right now. Is that sufficient?
Yeah, does everybody understand?
Yep.
Because right now, I think it still says 6 for the, in 554 1D. Right, so 6 months, we're changing that to 18 months, and the period of time during which we add up all of the changes for 50% purposes, you wish to change to 5 years.
Correct.
Got it.
Okay. So that's my motion.
And going back to the half mile.
And going back to the half mile in the parking. So. Yep.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have further comment on the ordinance as presented? Okay. We'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No. No.
Motion passes. Ordinance passes on first reading.
Next item is 7B, an ordinance of the Miami Shores Village Council of Miami Shores, Florida, establishing the Education Advisory Board, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. Staff on this item is sponsored by Vice Mayor Sean Brady.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Council, I just wanted to thank the clerk and the attorney and the staff for putting together this ordinance. The mission of this proposed board is, very clear, is based in the education compact that we, as a village, entered into with the Dade County Public School System, and I urge you all to support the creation of this commission, this board.
Great. Thank you. Council, any comments, questions? You want to go first?
Well, there's one one thing that's kind of interesting about the way that the ordinance is drafted, and that is that even though the education compact itself, in its agreement with the district, limits things to Miami Shores Elementary, I can see the way the ordinance is worded, that the group would be at liberty to try to address the needs of all students in especially in our charter schools. So I appreciate that, the way it's written, and I very strongly support the item. So.
Okay.
Sure, I was getting all defensive.
I have a question. One of the things that we talked about was having representation from the PTAs, like having a designated PTA member. Am I recollecting? You know.
7 members.
Yeah, it says it on the memo portion, but it doesn't say it in the ordinance that I can find. So I don't know if we want to actually write that into the ordinance, or do we just, I mean,
That's
I'd
a
have
really
to-
good point,
yeah.
because I was looking for it in the ordinance and didn't see
Yeah.
the designation PTAs.
Yeah.
When we put it together, I'll be very frank, I wasn't aware that that was something that you wanted
Okay.
specifically. Now, of course, you're all, since you're appointing the members, you can appoint the representatives of the PTA, but if you want them as an ex officio member, which is Latin for by virtue of their office, we probably should put that in there, and if it's the will of the council, we can do that before second reading.
Great. Councilwoman?
I like PTAs because I like to be able to draw upon people who have PTA experience. And they're usually people that are very active civically, and I would like to be able to draw upon them.
Dr.
I-
Lutton still here? No. Too bad.
Okay.
I move we appoint her.
So, it's my feeling that we should explicitly put in here that the president of the PTA of Miami Shores Elementary School should be as an ex officio member
I would,
of this.
Or their designee?
yeah, I
Or
would
their
say
designee.
designee, I
Okay.
wouldn't, leave it up
Yeah.
to them,
Yeah.
because, you know.
Yep, got it. That to me, I think, is important to give credibility to the organization and make sure that the school feels like, the school's parents feel like they have a seat at this
How
table.
about this, we'll include language that the PTA may designate an ex officio member.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, did you make a motion? Would you like to make a motion? Actually, before we do, let's go ahead and open a public hearing on this ordinance on first reading. Any public comment on this ordinance? Okay.
Just to be, thank you for that.
Yep.
And just to be clear, this is a public hearing. I
Yep.
mean, we're in the public, but what you're doing is you're opening up public comment.
Public comment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's a fine distinction.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close public comment. And I'm going to ask for a motion. Is there a motion somewhere?
Mr. Mayor, I
Yes.
would move to approve this ordinance on first reading with the amendment that we asked for, or with the additional we asked for. Thank you.
Got it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further comment? All right, call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Ordinance passes on first reading.
Next item is 8A, an ordinance of the Miami Shores Village Council, Miami Shores, Florida, adopting a 2018 capital improvements project schedule, annual update to the Miami Shores Village 2025 comprehensive plan, and providing for an effective date. Staff on this item is the Planning and Finance Directors.
Great, thank you. Okay. Mr. Manager, anything further added to this?
No, sir, this is more or less a housekeeping measure we do every year to provide the state with a list of our capital improvement items that you've already approved in the budget process.
Great, thank you. Okay. Council, any further comment on this? No? Okay, we'll open this up for public comment, this ordinance on public hearing. Any public comment on this? Okay, we're going to close public comment. Okay, I got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, moving on.
Next item is 8B, an ordinance of the Miami Shores Village Council, Miami Shores, Florida, amending Chapter 6, Building and Building Regulations of the Village Code of Ordinances by amending Section 6-12 by technical amendment to elevate construction in flood hazard areas, including flood hazard areas designated as coastal A zones to not less than 2 feet above the base flood elevation or the design flood elevation, whichever is higher, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. Staff of this item is the building official and planning director.
Okay. All right, folks, any further comments on this? No?
There's a scrivener's error in 4.2. The last line should be associated with the design flood elevation. The word elevation is left out.
Okay. Sure is. Thank you. Okay, we're going to open public comment on this ordinance. Is there any public comment on this ordinance on second reading? Okay. We are going to close public comment on this ordinance on second reading. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Oh, we need a motion. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve with the correction.
I'll second that.
Great. Nicely done. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Next item is 9A, discussion and possible action regarding the proposed agreement with the town of Bay Harbor Islands for the shared use of the aquatic center. This item is sponsored by Mayor McAdam Glynn.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I
Yeah.
may, I would like to introduce
Okay.
a colleague of mine
Okay.
from Bay Harbor Island. The manager has sat through, Mr. Ron Watson is here tonight.
Our longest meeting. Thank you for coming. You prepared this memo on the item. Mr. Manager, you want to walk through this first, and then I'll chime in once you've walked us through it?
Yes, sir. We have received a proposal from, as you know, from our previous meetings from Bay Harbor Island, asking us to allow the residents to use our facility for an annual payment of $50,000, plus they will pay the resident membership fee into our facility. We had done a similar type of thing with the town of Surfside some years back, approximately 10, 11 years back. Council had asked me what I thought we would generate in terms of revenue. Angie Dorney and her staff put together an estimate from when Surfside used our pool, and as I said in my memo, I don't know how the town of Surfside compares to Bay Harbor Islands in terms of usage, but we generated approximately $23,500 of gate revenue, which we would anticipate in addition to the $50,000 annual revenue. So that answers your question, I believe, on revenue generation expectations. The other thing you asked us to do was go back and poll other communities to find out if anybody else had a specific agreement with another community. And as you see from the survey that was provided to you by our rec staff, there's only one other area, and that is Miami Beach. In the Normandy area, they have a discount price for North Bay Village residents at certain times of the day in non-summer months. Most pools allow non-residents into their facilities year-round, of which, of course, we don't do that. We don't do that, and Surfside with their new pool does not do that. So I think that's kind of caught up as to where we're at and the questions that were asked of us.
Oh, and Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Oh, and Mr. Manager, I think also we asked you to take it to the Recreation
Rec
Board.
Advisory, I've included the minutes in here. The Rec Advisory Board unanimously approved of this proposal as well, and I included the minutes in your packet.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to actually just reiterate some of the items that came out in our last discussion and get them on the record here today, just for the benefit of the folks watching and understanding my thought process as to why I still very much support this item. What is our current utilization rate, would you say? Is Ms. Storney here?
Where'd Ms. Thorney go?
Yeah.
What was the question?
What is our current utilization rate? What level of capacity is our aquatic center at the
During
current time?
the summer months,
Yeah.
the highest peak, we're about 2/3 at capacity.
Okay, 2/3 of capacity. What is the annual deficit that we run on that facility as well?
360,000.
Right.
Okay. And what is the remaining lifespan of the equipment at that facility, approximately?
Few years.
A few years.
It depends on which pool. The activity pool, 3 years.
So
The competition pool, 15, 20.
Yes.
So my feeling is this, and we have excess capacity, significant capacity. We have significant capital needs when it comes to this facility, and we have a very gracious and willing tenant that would like to join us and utilize our facility. So I'm gonna support this item, but I'd like to hear from council as well. So I'll open it up to the rest of you. Council?
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Yep.
I think you were, as usual, well-spoken in the way you laid it out there. I mean, it makes sense on every level. A lot of people didn't realize, unless you've seen the numbers, how much this pool cost us, and not just for the construction from years ago, the upkeep. And our Public Works Department does incredible things with the way they rehab the existing equipment, rather than just saying, hey, you know, go buy a new, what, Tom, $300,000 for the kids' part?
700.
700. Oh, just doubled.
Yeah.
But I mean, a new revenue stream, isn't that what we talk about all the time? And I want to thank Bay Harbor for bringing this up, and I look forward to this working out for both parties.
Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor, I will echo Dr. Lutton, take the money.
Great. Other comments? Okay. I'm going to make a motion that we enter into this proposed agreement with the town of Bay Harbor Islands for the shared use of the aquatic center. Is there a second?
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Enter into a proposed agreement along these terms
A proposed agreement.
in a form approved by the village attorney.
In a form approved by the village attorney.
My lips never moved.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
I'll second.
Do you also want authorization for execution by the manager?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. I'd like to also amend that to include authorization for execution by the manager.
I'll second as amended.
Great. Further comment, questions, debate? Okay. Call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Welcome.
Thank you very much from the town. I know Mayor will be very happy as well as the council. I know they were really excited about this. And Tom was really great to work with, as well as his staff. It was very helpful.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks
See
for
you
coming tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for your patience.
See you at the pool.
Yeah.
Item 9D, discussion and possible action regarding ending the Line Bike pilot program. Staff on this item is the village manager.
Okay. Mr. Village Manager?
Yes, sir. As you see from my memo, the 90-day trial period for Line Bike expired, and staff is looking for direction as to what you would like us to do. If gave you some options, if you'd like to continue, we would certainly sit down with the Line Bike folks and hash out another contract to bring back to council.
Any comment, council?
Yes. I think, you know, Mr. Manager, you cooperated very well with Line Bike. Line Bike has cooperated well with us. Initially, the concerns that we had were well articulated both by the residents calling either Village Hall or calling Line Bike, and on social media, where, according to my accounting, the comments ran at least 2-to-1 in favor of this enhancement to our mobility in our village. And you know, I'm very appreciative of the way Line Bike responded when people that live here are very new to seeing bikes out on anywhere outside of their garage. And it took some adjustment for people to get used to seeing them around. This is probably the time that I should say that I when I looked at the statistics, I saw that there are 266 bikes on the roster there. And I am reflecting the views of some residents that I've heard from that say that that might be a few too many, that originally the agreement did reflect 100 bikes. But I also know from talking to someone from Lime Bike that the agreement with Barry University is now ready to go forward when the students return. So perhaps some of that overstock of bikes would be able to be redirected or restocked there. Sir?
Yep. Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I know it's not really a public comment period, but I just wanted to answer your question. My understanding on the number of bikes included in the backup document that you received is that there are approximately 250 bikes that have been cycled through the city, some of them being put into circulation and out of circulation, but it doesn't mean that there are 250 or whatever the number is bikes on the street at any given time. At any given time, that number is around, I believe, 100. We're very cognizant of the limits included in our agreement, because that's the number that jumped out at me as well. And so Lime Bike reps are here to confirm that that's the number of bikes that have actually been cycled through the program.
No pun intended.
Yes, correct. No pun intended.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That was good. No, thank you. All right, further comment? Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, like Councilwoman, Birch, agree with the program and think that it's something that we want to, or at least I would be in favor of continuing. The only things that I've heard, and the managers told me that perhaps they've been addressed, is that the bikes end up all over the place in people's yards, that there are too many of them. Maybe you want to send some of them to North Miami. I think you guys are getting a program there tonight. I was there earlier. And they asked me specifically about the program and whether it was successful, and I told them it was. So that's the only thing that I've heard. And then, of course, complaints from the local business that is the bicycle shop, of course. But otherwise, I think it's a great program. Has anyone been hurt on any of the bikes? Knock on wood, no?
No.
Good. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a big supporter, frequent user, and I wholly support moving forward. I would like to see the residents' concerns. I'd like to see Lime Bike market and publicize a way for somebody to immediately contact you if they don't want a bike in front of their house. Okay, because it's not fair to them. If I leave a bike in front of somebody else's house and it's there for a day or two, there should be a streamlined, efficient, quick way. They shouldn't have to call Tom. They shouldn't have to call the police. They should call you all, and we want that out. Or I want that out there, so it's moved, right?
Maybe a phone number on the bike.
Something, and maybe you can market it, put it in our newsletter, but just really emphasize a way for somebody to get rid of the bike in front of their house. They can go put it in front of my house, I don't care. But they have the right not to have the bike in front of their house, and they shouldn't be swallowed in red tape or green tape to get rid of it. Fair enough?
Yeah, please come up, state your name, address. Yep.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Ruby. Live in 6340 Southwest 26th Street. And to comment on that, sir, through the application, the Lime Bike application, there is a trouble call where you can immediately submit a certain bike if it's broken or if it's in public property.
Right, but that's me, who I have the app on my phone, and we do that. But I'm saying like somebody who's just cranky.
Yeah.
They don't use your bikes.
Yeah.
And it's in front of their house, or maybe not even.
Computers.
Or right, they're not gonna. You know what I mean? They don't have the app. How would they know how to get a hold of you?
So in that way, they can either go to the Lime Bike website.
They don't have a computer.
They don't have a computer.
I know it's a foreign concept to you at your stage of life.
Yeah.
But there's some people who don't have computers.
Yes.
So what I'm asking you to do is just think about it, focus on it, is to publicize it.
An
Maybe
800
through
number on the bike.
our village.
Give me an 800 number on the bike.
Right?
Yeah.
I think they have phones. But
absolutely.
that way, right, to get
100,
this
get rid of
moved,
this.
and also work with the village to put in our newsletter, because they still read the newsletter. If there's a bike that you want it moved, call Line Bike, here's the number. It's pretty simple.
Absolutely.
That would, I'm just telling you, that would eliminate 99.9% of the issues with Lime Bike. If you just gave people an easy way and then expediently got rid of it when they didn't want it.
Right.
And that, please, help us help you, please.
Absolutely.
Put a number on there. Okay, hold on. I want to give some more guidance. I'd like to chime in on this as well. So this is we do not have a concession here. Well, I mean, it's an agreement, but they're not paying us anything. And under those circumstances, I believe there should be a robust termination clause here. And I want to make sure that whatever agreement we enter, if we go forward with an agreement, that there is a, well, it does. Yeah, 30-day termination for convenience, done, okay? But I also want to continue, seeing that we're not getting paid, and maybe somebody wants to talk about that tonight, but that allows for competition. This cannot be exclusive, right? So I want it to stay not exclusive. Okay, so,
I think it's the same
if
terms we have.
which is fine. As long as it follows those forms and includes those clauses in particular, I think that I would support it. I think it's a great program. Everybody that's used it, that I know, loves it. Any other comments? Council? Vice Mayor?
Mr. Mayor? Let's say, I think that was what, that's funny, because I was going to ask him the same question. So we asked it to have an annual renewal?
Yeah, so, why doesn't somebody make a motion and include a length of time? How about that?
I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to enter an agreement, renewable at 1 year, with all of the other terms discussed here by the council.
Let me make a suggestion.
Sure.
Instead of a motion, if we have a consensus, we'll bring it back with an actual hard copy of the document and ask your approval of that.
I like that idea much better. Okay. Oh, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Can we just request clarification that until that is brought back, the program can continue so that there's not an interruption in service?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I don't think anyone has a problem with that.
No.
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
Good point, thank you.
Okay. All right, so by consensus, are we comfortable with the village attorney bringing back an agreement that would extend the services of Lime Bike here in the village?
Yes.
Yep, great. Okay, done. Thank you very much. Okay.
Announcements. The next meeting of the Village Council will be held at 6:30 PM on Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018. Village offices will be closed on Monday, January 15th, in observance of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. Normal sanitation schedules will be followed. And please remember to visit the village website to sign up to receive agenda notifications at miamishoresvillage.com. The next item is Village Council comments.
Okay. Council, any comments?
Oh, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to, I believe we have a fireside concert this Friday evening. Moonlight, I apologize, Moonlight concert. So we just wanted to mention that, to everyone, that's a really nice thing, funded by us and put on by the Fine Arts Commission. 6 p.m., I believe, at 6:30 p.m.
Food is available at 6:30, the concert starts.
So come out at 6 to the field house, get some food, come enjoy some music with your neighbors. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other comment?
Plaza 98. I want to mention Plaza 98. It's going to happen this Saturday night at beginning at 5:30. It's featuring a yoga class that is free, as well as music by a DJ and various food options. There will be a ribbon cutting for a bench that has been underwritten by the Miami Realtors. Plaza 98 is a really exciting event. Don't want to miss it, and hope everyone will come out to that.
Great, thank you. Other comments? Yep.
Mr. Mayor? I want to remind everybody that the Miami-Dade, that we're doing a rain barrel water conservation workshop Saturday morning, January 20th at the Community Center, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. There's, I believe it was mentioned, was it mentioned in the newsletter? If not, it's on Eventbrite, eventbrite.com. You can also just punch that in, Rain Barrel Conservation Workshop, Miami Shores, and you are able to purchase, pre-order a rain barrel at half price, and you'll pick it up there. They'll show you how to attach the spigot and how to save water. But it's really great program with the county. They do this in limited numbers of locations over the year, and we're lucky enough to get, I think, their first one of the new year. So I think it's limited to 100 people, so quickly sign up if you want a rain barrel. Otherwise, you're free just to attend and learn how to save and conserve that precious water. Thank you.
Okay, further comment?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no specific announcements. I just wanted to wish everyone a happy and healthy and prosperous new year, and thank everyone for coming out. It's always great to see the residents here participating in our meetings. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor, anything to add? Okay. So first of all, I wanted to thank Councilman Meltz for his initiative on the rain barrels. I think that's awesome. I love my rain barrel. I think it's great. It is an easy way to promote sustainability and be sustainable in your own life. Want to wish everybody a Happy New Year as well. Hope it's a successful, prosperous one. Again, really appreciate seeing so many faces out here engaged today and participating in the process. I think we did a lot of good today, and that feels nice. So, Happy New Year, and meeting's adjourned.
Well done.
Yes.
What's the theory? If you build the thing,